Do not worry, this is not going to be my only video on the Xenoblade XDE epilogue at all. I'm just making this quickly first before I make a big full breakdown of the entire thing, just because it's a topic that I haven't seen anyone even mention publicly online yet. If you could not tell by the fact that there is a Xenoblade 3 character in the thumbnail of this Xenoblade X video, I will not only be spoiling X and the new DE content, but also the entire numbered Xenoblade trilogy as well. Reactions overall to X's new epilogue are about as mixed as I expected they'd be given the content therein, and yeah, I am kinda just right down the middle with it. It is not bad, it is not worth rage quitting the series over, but it's also, like, only better than Future Connected. If you view Chapter 13 on its own, it is not remotely even reaching the heights of the proper DLC from 2 and 3. But if all of these story elements happened and they were the last 30 hours of a 70-hour Xenoblade X2 instead of the last 15 hours of an XDE, they would be almost perfect. I am pretty sure that most of the broad strokes of Chapter 13 are the original intended ending for the extended X story that did not make it into the original game, but they were not able to include all of the original story in DE because everything that didn't make it into the original X was repurposed for stuff in Xenoblade 2 and 3, which came out after, and 2 was at least partially in development by the time X released, and they had basic ideas for 3 by the time they started work on 2, so it's pretty likely that back in 2016, 2017, they didn't think that they'd be able to follow up on X anymore, so they repurposed as many unused ideas as they could for 2 and 3, and then, now that they were allowed to follow up on X, they more or less just Xenogears Disc 2'd all the remaining stuff they had left that wasn't already used for another game to get X to the original ending in time for whatever the next phase of the series is. And yeah, I also don't get why people think the epilogue and what it does is them closing the book on X and relegating its characters to cameos in a future game, and not the extremely obvious layup to a Xenoblade X2 that it very much is. The only difference is that they have some aliens on board the ship, and it's probably going to land safely and not crash this time. There is an entire different planet that is in no way directly confirmed to be a planet from anywhere else in the series, so they could just make it not a planet from anywhere else in the series and have you explore that in a new game. And even if it is a planet from somewhere else in the series, which I'm not denying the possibility that it is, they could just land on a place where nobody else is, and meeting the other characters and their civilization could be a later thing that happens partway through the story as a plot twist. My least favorite part about the epilogue by far is the fact that we lost Mira, the best Xenoblade X character, so abruptly and so unceremoniously after all the time that was spent building it up. But it does slightly lessen the blow to realize that it has been 2 console generations since Mira was designed, and the only way to do X2 on Mira would be giving the existing continents a Tears of the Kingdom style overhaul, and then just sticking more continents elsewhere on the planet nearby. And it's completely okay story-wise to just be like, okay, we discovered these new landmasses, but from a level design perspective and a visual perspective, it would probably be too jarring to go from late 2020 stuff to 2015 stuff. And even then, giving a Tears of the Kingdom overhaul to the existing Mira would decrease the amount of work you could put into the newly designed landmasses, which would make them smaller, which would give you the exact same issues Tears of the Kingdom have, where you have a mostly samey original overworld and then a few new kinda cool areas that just aren't big enough to justify the wait time. I think from a gameplay perspective, it would be much better for X2 to just be a completely newly designed planet from the ground up for Switch 2. Anyway though, with the setup of the ending cutscene and the fact that they got literally every single voice actor for a major character from the original back, barring 2 people from the English dub, I can't see how you would think they're not going to be using these characters again in a major capacity. Like, as far as I can tell, the 3 major Xeno projects for the Switch 2 generation are going to be Xenoblade 4, Xenoblade X2, and something that has to do with Xenosaga, and I don't even know what order they're going to be in, and we could see the first one as soon as later this year, so that is genuinely really exciting to think about. What was also really interesting to think about, though, is the antagonist of Xenoblade XDE. I don't think I'm ever really going to be a big fan of Void from a character perspective. He's just kinda there. But conceptually, thematically, and lore-wise, there are a lot of cool things you can talk about related to him, which I'm sure I will do in the future. I think the mystery behind what he is surprisingly compelling, and I had a lot of different ideas for his background and how he got the way he is while I was playing through the epilogue, none of which were correct. Well, yes, him just being a Samarian that was ascended by conduit juice isn't the most interesting possibility. I did not at all think that he was going to end up being what if Klaus was betrayed and trapped in the time chamber for a million years. And while I think there is some merit in comparing and contrasting him with Zanza because of their similarities, that's not the previous Xenoblade antagonist I want to talk about. As you could tell by the thumbnail, I actually want to talk about Zed. I'm kind of surprised I haven't heard people talking about Void and Zed in the same breath, because it seems like the positives and negatives of both from a storytelling perspective are pretty similar. As a character on their own, they're not great, but conceptually, there's a lot of cool things to unpack with them. Though I do think conceptually and thematically, Moebius as a whole is a lot stronger than whatever Void is, and there are more Moebius while there are only one Void. Zed and his posse definitely edge it out on that one. Like, obviously, also, Zed has a lot more screen time, and he has some aura, a lot of iconic lines, and the memes, so just character to character, he also wins out. But there are cool contrasting points with him and Void. Elma's people erroneously assume that Void is some sort of primordial entity, which Zed actually is. Moebius's main goal is to preserve their lives at all costs by keeping the world in stasis, something that's going to eventually come and bite them because the annihilation events are destroying Ionios no matter what, and there is eventually going to be no world for them to control. While Void was effectively granted eternal life in the Rift against his will and wants to know and understand death, and in doing so, invites the ghosts to destroy various worlds on purpose, using DMAT instead of annihilation events. Their final boss forms are somewhat similar looking. There are 6 members of Ouroboros in Xenoblade 3, and 6 Ares cores that eventually defeat Void in XDE, and then also the method of their defeat is pretty similar because, you know, Ouroboros and Ares cores work pretty much the same in terms of staving and amplifying the power of souls of sentient life. In fact, 2.5 worlds are responsible for the defeat of Zed. The original world of 1, the original world of 2, and the new life formed in Ionios. And while it seems like the Ares is drawing on a lot more sentient life than just 2.5 worlds in XDE, it seems like the majority of people powering up the final battle against Void are the people of Earth, the people of Elma's world, and the people humanity ran into on Mira. While we initially see Zed in his humanoid form and he later transforms for the final battle, throughout the entire epilogue, Void is either using the Vita as a vessel or in his final boss form, and we don't see even a little bit of what he looked like in his original Samarian form until Al's narration of his backstory after the end of the fight. And hey, wait a minute. Pale, pointy ears, he actually looks a lot like Zed. Guys, Zed's appearance was based on Void. Now, I don't mean that was a character design inspiration out of universe. I mean canonically, Void looking the way he does is why Zed looks the way he does. There were a lot of moving parts when 3 first came out, so it does make sense no one really thought to talk about this until now, but it is pretty strange that Zed doesn't look like anyone from any of the races in Origin, right? Moebius is the will of people stored there made manifest, so you'd think that he'd look like one of the races in there, or an average of all of them having high Entia wings and a core crystal and cat ears or something like that. Or even just a generic human, because honestly, if you do average out all the races, then you do probably get something resembling a generic humanoid. But no, you've got a skin color that's not really seen anywhere in Xenoblade 1 and 2. Although, curiously, it resembles Elma's in her true form more than anything. And then pointed ears. But they're pointed ears shaped differently than the Hyentia that have pointed ears in 1, or the way Indoline ears look. So other than broad strokes, he doesn't really bear any big similarities to the kinds of people whose wills made him in the first place. Honestly, if you showed me Zed's art and maybe his model, and told me that this was concept sketches for another member of Elma's race in a Xenoblade X2, I would probably believe you if I hadn't played Xenoblade 3 yet. And that's where things get kinda neat. I'm mostly of the opinion that the clips of the numbered games while Al's in the Rift are just to indicate to the player that yes, X is in the same multiverse as them, like I've been saying for years now, by the way. So we might not even have to explain some sort of relative time wackiness with relation to those universes and X's as well as those in each other, but the clip used for Xenoblade 3 is one from within Ionios, which, if we take that as something Al directly saw, indicates that the moment of time Ionios takes place in, at least related to the other two universes it's connected to, who knows how that works related to Mira or the Rift or any other universe out there, but Ionios came into existence before Chapter 13 of Xenoblade XDE, which means Volataris, and by extension, Void and whatever was left of his original body, were in the Rift the same time Origin was. Think about it. The Rift is the nexus of parallel realities. Origin was designed to survive the annihilation of two realities and then recreate them. Where exactly would it be located after those two worlds were destroyed and before it recreated them? I don't know about you, but the backrooms of the multiverse, from which someone with enough power can reach a different universe, seems like a pretty good place. That's not the only connection too. Design-wise, Origin bears a lot of similarity to the green lights inside Volataris that demarcate the playable area, and the Ghost mothership from the opening cutscene, which suggests that maybe those design elements are something conducive for surviving in the Rift, at least on the megastructure scale that all of those things are. Origin was built using both technology and knowledge from the Trinity processor, and it seems like the Trinity cores are able to work pretty well even without the conduit present, so it seems like they're able to at least somewhat mimic its power. The 6 cores that the Ares uses are pretty much literally Xenosaga Zohar emulators, with a different name in a different shape, and mimicking the functions of the Samarian's conduit as opposed to the Xenosaga Zohar. The Ares, with about a week of jury-rigging, was capable of dragging the entire Manon ship and everyone aboard through the Rift into the universe that we see at the end of XDE, so I think it's pretty likely that the greatest minds of Bionis, Mechanis, and Allrest, given a timescale of much more than a year, keep in mind the 1 Melia conversation we see is when they had only a year left, would be able to use similar technology to instead use the Rift as a springboard for recreating their worlds after their immediate destruction. What else did we learn that's special about the Rift? Well, unless it's being used for something like the Ares, it seems like the consciousnesses of sentient beings are present there, and they gather together in some kind of collective unconscious thing. So if there's a collective unconscious in the Rift, and then somewhere else in the Rift all of a sudden pops in this giant ball of metal, Origin metal by the way, which we know as a fact is really good at storing souls and resonating with the soul and consciousness of the person within to do things, because that's how a lot of things in Xenoblade 3 happen, then I don't know, I think it makes sense that that big flow induced a smaller flow with the consciousness of the people just within Origin, and that's what led to the Moebius thoughts accumulating. But what then would this force physically take the appearance of? Well, Al hadn't gotten there yet, and we don't quite know exactly how Moebius's takeover of Origin worked. There is wiggle room to say that some people, like the Queens, were physically present there and fighting against Moebius in that way, but it's equally likely that it is just wills overpowering wills, and the people who wanted an Endless Now were stronger than the main cast at that time and stuff like that. Either way though, the only person with a physical body in the Rift who wouldn't be directly fighting against Moebius at the time was Void himself. On top of that, it just kind of makes sense. Moebius is this new, formless, sentient force seeking eternity. Who better to imprint on than someone who is granted eternity and has been there for so long they can't even think properly anymore? We never get to speak to Void when he still has his sanity, but honestly, even in this state, his personality is pretty similar to Zed's. They do a lot of the same pontificating, they make a lot of the big declarative statements, and they both clearly speak as if they're educated individuals. So it's possible this formless proto-Moebius took a bit more from Void than just his appearance. If we assume that Zed looks like Void on purpose, then we can kind of understand Void's design pretty well. Why does he have pointy ears and that skin color? Well, we learn in DE that humans are not the only descendants of Samar. The other confirmed descendants are the Clorians and Elma's people, but given how he describes himself as a potential future for humanity, It's very possible Professor B is a Samarian descendant too, and honestly, L has a small chance of being one as well, given that he also has pointed ears. His horns could be an evolution of the crystals Elma's race has in their foreheads, and honestly, L's race is the most human-looking out of all the ones from X we haven't talked about yet, so if anyone else is a Samarian descendant, it is him. This is a good explanation for Moebius Z, but what about the two other true Moebius, X and Y? Well, if you look at Zed's outfit, and you look at a couple of the other slides of Void's backstory, you can see that he might have also gotten his clothes from what the ancient Samarians were wearing. This means that Void might have some lingering memories still, and Moebius was able to cotton on to that to influence more than just Zed's appearance and personality. Who are X and Y? Well, their personalities and appearance might be based off of other Samarians Void knew and still remembered. Do X and Y have rounded ears? Yes, but so do X-Earth humans and Professor B, and they're also Samarian descendants, so I don't know. Maybe some of the original Samarians had pointed ears, some of them had rounded ones, some of them had Clurian-looking ears, and when Void's conduit oopsie happened and destroyed his universe, some of them got flung into different ones or different places in the same one, and each of them became the ancestors to different Samarian descended races that we see in the present day of X. I'm almost certainly coping here, but X, Y, and Z do have slightly different skin, hair, and eye colors from each other, and X's and Y's appear a bit less like Elma's skin color, and a bit more like an extremely pallid, light-skinned human, and this is a massive reach, but Y's hair and eye color are actually very similar to Neilnail's, so maybe a Samarian who looked a lot like him was an ancestor to the Clurians. There's also the Zarubagans and their creators, which look like Earth humans and not any of the other Samar-descended races or the Samarians themselves, which leads me to believe that, okay, maybe they were created by a human-looking Samar descendant elsewhere in this or a previous universe, or some Samarians looked like that, or that even though they do look like Void at some point in time, the Samarians are still heavily advanced humans from a different Earth that just happened to safely and prosperously use the conduit until Void showed up, evolving and colonizing the multiverse along the way. I say that they might be Earth humans because every single time anything like the conduit shows up in the Xeno series, it's always discovered as a relic on Earth. And while, yeah, infinite multiverse, there's an infinite amount of possibilities for how a conduit could manifest, precedent heavily suggests the Samarians were at least exploring an Earth somewhere in the multiverse for them to be able to find one. Keep in mind, this hypothetical Earth, it's not Klaus's Earth, it's not the one destroyed in X, it's just its own thing in a completely different universe. Perhaps one of those Samarian explorers even ventured out into the Rift and observed other versions of the planet Earth. Maybe even one that would one day become home to a human named Klaus. A man who would make a lot of the same mistakes Void later would with the Samarians' own conduit. But even then, I don't think any of the Samarians could have ever foreseen that Void and some people he knew and their personalities would be the influence to Moebius, the latest in a line of many threats to the people descended from Klaus's world. We're done talking about Moebius here, but there's one more thing I'd like to point out. We know almost nothing about the Samarians at large. We know they had a conduit at some point, they were probably capable of transferring through universes with it, and that's about it. We killed Void, but what happened to the rest of them? They might still have their conduit. I think the Samarians and the Ghosts are going to be a potential overarching threat for the future of the series. They're out there. We know from Klaus's conduit incident that using it in the wrong way could fling people across many universes. So like I said before, it's possible that a lot of different Samarians got flung into a lot of different universes, and they probably have a lot more descendants out there than the ones that we've directly seen in X. So there's a lot of potential stories with them there. And honestly, unless you want to go down the evil Udu route, an entire hyper-advanced civilization that was able to use the conduit properly for an unknown period of time sounds like a pretty big way to escalate the stakes and actually come up with a new antagonist that all of the Xenoblade characters coming off of the end of their games would actually struggle against. Until the main video where I talk about the entire epilogue, though, this is Luxon, signing off.